The cold seeped through Maya Chen's ghillie suit where she lay prone on the ridge, her cheek pressed against the stock of her MK-13 sniper rifle. 6 hours in position. 6 hours watching the Korangal Valley through her thermal scope while the stars faded and the first gray light of dawn crept over the mountains of eastern Afghanistan. 12 Rangers moved through the valley below, small heat signatures picking their way toward extraction. Her job was to keep them alive. Torres had made it clear that her job was also to stay out of the way. Senior Chief Torres's voice crackled through her earpiece with that familiar edge of dismissal. Overwatch 2, you have Sector 7. East Ridge, low priority. Keep your eyes open and your mouth shut. She keyed her mic. Copy, Senior Chief. Sector 7. The other snipers drew the primary routes, the choke points, the likely ambush corridors. She got the quiet sector, the go paths, the nothing. Fourth mission in a row. Torres had positioned her where she could do the least good, see the least action, prove the least about what she could do. Maya adjusted her scope and began her scan. The mountains here held secrets in every shadow, and she had learned long ago that quiet sectors had a way of becoming loud without warning. That was the thing about underestimation. People who dismissed you never saw you coming, but they also never saw what was coming for them. Movement. East Ridge, 900 meters out. 3 figures emerged from behind a rock formation, moving with purpose that had nothing to do with herding goats. She tracked them through her thermal, watching the signatures bloom bright against the cool mountain stone. She keyed her mic. Overwatch 2, reporting 3 military-age males. Grid reference Echo 7-9er, moving to elevated position overlooking the valley floor. Torres responded within seconds. Probably locals. Goat herders use those paths. Hold position. Maya watched the figures reach their destination and begin unpacking equipment. The shape that emerged was unmistakable even at this distance. Long barrel, bipod, ammunition belt. Overwatch 2, she said, keeping her voice level. Contacts are establishing a PKM position. They have a clear firing lane on Ranger element. Static. Then Torres again, irritation bleeding through. Chun, I said hold position. You are seeing goat herders. Do not clog comms with phantom contacts. Focus on your sector and let the professionals handle threat assessment. The professionals. She bit down on the response that wanted to come. 3 years in special operations. Top of her sniper school class. 14 confirmed kills across 2 deployments. But Torres had decided before she ever arrived that she did not belong, and nothing she did would change his mind. She watched the PKM team settle into position. Watched them sight down into the valley where 12 Americans walked toward a place they would never walk out of. More movement in her scope. Another position, 200 meters south of the first. 2 more fighters with an RPG launcher. Then another cluster further east. Then more on the north ridge. Maya counted. 14 fighters. 18. 23. She stopped counting at 30 because the number no longer mattered. What mattered was the geometry. 3 sides of a box. PKM positions for suppressive fire. RPG teams for vehicles and cover. Riflemen to finish whatever the heavy weapon started. A textbook ambush, and the Rangers were walking directly into the kill zone. Wherever you are watching this, maybe from your couch after a long shift or lying in bed unable to sleep, you know what it feels like when you see something terrible coming and no one will listen. That moment when you have to decide whether following orders matters more than doing what is right. Maya keyed her mic one more time. Overwatch 2 reporting coordinated enemy positions establishing on 3 sides of Ranger element. Count exceeds 30 fighters. Recommend immediate warning to ground element. Torres's response was ice. Chun, you are relieved of communications. 1 more transmission, and I will have you brought in for psychiatric evaluation. There are no enemy positions. There are goat herders. Now shut up and watch your sector. She turned her head slightly and looked at the valley floor where the Rangers moved in a loose patrol formation, completely unaware of what waited above them. 12 men, sons and brothers and husbands, walking toward death while she lay on a ridge with the skills to save them and orders that said she could not. The first PKM team, chamber round. The sound would not carry this far, but Maya could see the motion, the preparation, the coiling of violence about to spring. Minutes now, maybe less. She had a choice to make. Follow orders and watch Americans die, or disobey and face whatever consequences came. Torres would end her career. The Navy might prosecute her. Everything she had worked for could disappear in the space of a single trigger pull. Maya Chun settled her cheek against a rifle and began calculating windage for the PCAM position 982 meters away. Staff Sergeant Derek Holloway moved through the valley with the particular alertness that came from 5 deployments in country that wanted him dead. Dawn painted the ridgelines gold and purple, beautiful in a way that always felt like mockery when you were exposed and far from home. 12 Rangers in patrol formation behind him. Good men, trained men, men who trusted him to bring them home. The extraction point waited 3 clicks ahead, helicopters scheduled for 0530, and somewhere on the ridges above them SEAL snipers watched over their movement like guardian angels with long rifles. Holloway keyed his radio. Viper 6 to Overwatch. We are approaching Checkpoint Delta. Request status on our route. The response came from someone called Overwatch 1, a senior chief whose name Holloway did not know. Viper 6, Overwatch 1. Route is clear. Proceed to extraction. Clear. The word should have brought comfort. Instead, something in Holloway's gut twisted. The valley felt wrong. Too quiet. Too empty. The goats that usually dotted these hillsides were nowhere to be seen, and the locals who normally watched American patrol from their doorways had vanished. He was about to key his mic again when the world turned to fire. The PCAM opened up from the East Ridge first, that distinctive heavy chatter that every infantry soldier learned to fear. Holloway watched Private First Class Donovan spin and drop, red mist hanging in the morning air where his shoulder used to be intact. Then the North Ridge erupted, then the South, and Holloway understood with terrible clarity that they had walked into a kill zone. Cover, he screamed. Find cover now. But there was no cover. They stood in a natural bowl, a depression in the valley floor that offered nothing but loose rocks and scrub brush. The terrain that seemed like easy walking had been chosen specifically because it offered no protection. They were fish in a barrel, and the bullets came from everywhere. Specialist Reeves went down clutching his leg. Sergeant Webb took shrapnel from a rock that exploded 2 feet from his face. Holloway dragged both men toward a shallow depression that might stop pistol rounds but would do nothing against the heavy machine guns systematically working across their position. He keyed his radio with blood-slicked fingers. Overwatch, Overwatch, this is Viper 6. We are taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Request immediate support. We are pinned down and taking casualties. The voice that came back was calm in a way that made Holloway want to reach through the radio and strangle someone. Viper 6, Overwatch 1. We are assessing the situation. Hold your position. Hold position. Holloway almost laughed. They were dying, and command wanted them to hold position. We cannot hold, he shouted into the radio. I have men down. I have enemy on 3 sides. I need fire support now. An RPG streaked down from the North Ridge and detonated 15 meters to his left. The blast wave knocked Corporal Martinez flat, and when the dust cleared, Martinez was not moving right. Something wrong with the angle of his neck, the stillness of his chest. Holloway counted muzzle flashes through the chaos. East Ridge, North Ridge, South. At least 25 shooters, probably more. Professional spacing. Coordinated fire. This was not some random Taliban ambush thrown together by farmers with rifles. This was a planned operation executed by people who knew exactly what they were doing. He did the math that every infantry leader learned to do in moments like this. 12 men, standard combat load, current rate of fire. 6 minutes of ammunition, maybe 7 if they were disciplined. Then empty magazines and fixed bayonets against 30 enemies on the high ground. Return fire, he ordered because there was nothing else to order. Make them pay for every inch. His Rangers fought. God, they fought. Webb was bleeding from his face, but still putting rounds down range. Specialist Torres, no relation to any SEAL, covered their eastern flank with controlled bursts that spoke to training holding firm under fire. Even the wounded crawled to positions where they could contribute. But it was not enough. It could never be enough. The geometry was impossible, the numbers overwhelming, and Holloway felt death closing around his patrol like a fist. Another ranger fell. Private Chun, fresh from ranger school, took a round through his hip that dropped him screaming. Holloway crawled toward him, tourniquet already in hand, when the PKM on the east ridge shifted its fire directly onto his position. Dirt erupted in a line walking toward him. Holloway pressed flat against the ground and made peace with whatever came next. He had led men into an ambush, and now they would all die here in this valley whose name he could not even pronounce. Then he heard it. A single rifle crack, distant and sharp, completely different from the cacophony of automatic fire. And the PKM that had been about to kill him went silent. Holloway lifted his head. The East Ridge position had stopped firing. He could see a figure slumped over the machine gun, motionless. Another crack. The RPG team on the North Ridge scattered as one of their number dropped. Another crack. Another. Someone was shooting from somewhere far away, and every shot found its mark. Holloway scanned the ridge lines desperately, trying to find the source, trying to understand who had joined the fight on their side. He saw nothing. No muzzle flash, no position, no indication of where their salvation was coming from. But the enemy saw nothing either, and they were starting to panic. Maya watched 12 Americans die through her scope. The ambush unfolded exactly as she had reported, exactly as Torres had dismissed. PKM positions opening up in sequence, RPG teams targeting any hint of cover, riflemen filling the gaps with disciplined fire. A coordinated slaughter executed against men who had trusted their overwatch to keep them safe. Through her thermal scope, she could see the Rangers trying to find cover that did not exist. She watched one fall, then another. She watched a sergeant drag wounded men toward a depression too shallow to protect them from anything. She watched muzzle flashes bloom across 3 ridge lines while the men below scrambled and bled and died. Her finger rested beside the trigger guard, 982 meters to the primary PKM position. She had the shot. She had a dozen shots. From her angle on the western ridge, the enemy positions that were invisible to the Rangers below stood exposed and vulnerable. She could end this. She keyed her mic Overwatch 2, requesting permission to engage enemy positions. I have clear shots on multiple targets. Torres came back instantly. Negative, Overwatch 2. Hold position. We are coordinating response. Coordinating response. She could hear the Rangers screaming over the tactical net, hear their patrol leader begging for support that was not coming. She could see another American fall in her scope, his heat signature dimming as blood left his body. Overwatch 2, I have immediate shots on the positions that are killing them. Request permission to engage. I said negative. Torres's voice carried an edge of fury now. Air support is inbound. Hold your position and maintain fire discipline, or I will have you court-martialed. Air support. Maya checked the mission brief in her mind. The nearest air asset was 40 minutes out. In 40 minutes, every ranger in that valley would be dead. Torres knew that. He had to know that, unless he did not care, unless letting them die was preferable to admitting she had been right. She watched another RPG streak down into the valley. Watched the explosion throw bodies and dirt into the air. Watched men she had sworn to protect get torn apart, while she lay on a ridge with a rifle that could save them and orders that said she could not. Maya Chun had joined the Navy to protect American lives. She had endured the doubt and the dismissal and the constant need to prove herself because she believed the mission mattered more than the prejudice. She had followed orders even when those orders came from men who would never see her as an equal. But she could not follow this order, not with 12 men dying below her, not when she had the power to stop it. She keyed her mic one final time. Overwatch 2 engaging targets in Sector 7. Torres's response was immediate and volcanic. Chun, you are ordered to stand down. Do not engage. I repeat, do not. She turned off her radio. The silence that followed was absolute. No more voices in her ear. No more orders. Just Maya and her rifle and the enemy positions that needed to die. She settled her breathing, checked her windage calculation. The first PKM was 982 meters out. The gunner hunched behind his weapon, pouring fire into the valley. Crosshairs centered on his chest. Exhale. Pause. Squeeze. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, and the gunner slumped over his weapon. She worked the bolt, smooth and automatic, and acquired the assistant gunner before he understood what had happened. Second shot, second kill. She shifted to the RPG team on the North Ridge. 1,047 meters. 2 men scrambling to reload. The loader took her third round through the spine. The gunner tried to run, and her fourth round dropped him before he made it 3 steps. Maya entered the place that every sniper knows, that state of absolute focus where the world narrows to mathematics and physics and the simple mechanical action of sending death downrange. Range calculation, wind adjustment, trigger squeeze, work the bolt, acquire, repeat. The enemy fighters could not see her. Her position on the western ridge was outside their ambush geometry, a flank they had not planned for because they had not known she existed. One by one they died, without ever knowing where the bullets came from. She took the second PKM team at 912 meters. Took a fighter trying to reposition at 1,016 meters. Took a spotter who made the mistake of standing up to search for her at 1,180 meters. For minutes. 19 rounds. 14 confirmed kills. The enemy fire began to slacken. The coordinated ambush dissolved into chaos as fighters realized they were being hunted by something they could not see or understand. Some tried to retreat, and she dropped them as they ran. Others pressed flat against the rocks and stopped shooting, suddenly understanding that any movement meant death. The valley below grew quieter. Rangers who had been pinned and dying now had room to breathe, to move, to tend their wounded. Maya kept scanning, kept hunting, kept killing anything that threatened the men she had disobeyed orders to save. Her radio sat silent beside her. Somewhere Torres was screaming into a frequency she could no longer hear. Somewhere her career was ending. But 12 Americans were still breathing in that valley, and nothing Torres could do to her would ever make that the wrong choice. Holloway pressed his face into the dirt and waited for the PKM to finish what had started. The heavy rounds walked across the ground toward him, inevitable as a heartbeat, and he thought about his daughter back in Georgia who would grow up without a father. Then the shooting stopped. He lifted his head, expecting to see the gunner reloading, expecting the brief pause before the killing resumed. Instead, he saw a figure slumped over the machine gun, motionless against the morning sky. Another rifle crack echoed across the valley, distant and precise. The RPG team on the North Ridge came apart, one man dropping instantly while the other scrambled for cover he would never reach. A third crack, and he fell too. Holloway's mind raced through possibilities. Air support was 40 minutes out. The SEAL Overwatch positions were on the wrong angle to hit those targets. Someone else was shooting, someone he could not see, and every shot they fired saved American lives. Who the hell is that? Webb shouted from his position 10 meters away, blood still streaming down his face. Holloway shook his head. He scanned the ridgelines desperately, searching for muzzle flash, for any indication of where their guardian angel had positioned. The western ridge showed nothing but rock and scrub. No glint of glass, no movement, no sign that anything human existed there at all. But the shots kept coming. Crack, crack, crack. Each one deliberate, each one lethal. The enemy positions that had been shredding his patrol fell silent one by one as an invisible rifle reached out and touched them with terrible precision. The Taliban fighters began to panic. Their coordinated ambush dissolved into chaos as men who had expected easy slaughter found themselves hunted instead. One tried to reposition and dropped mid-stride. Another broke from cover to run and made it 3 steps before the distant rifle found him. Holloway seized the moment. Rangers, he bellowed. Shift fire to the North Ridge. Keep their heads down. His men responded with the discipline that made Rangers what they were. Even wounded, even terrified, they put rounds downrange and added to the pressure that invisible sniper had created. The enemy fighters who had not already died pressed flat against rocks and stopped shooting, suddenly more afraid of drawing attention than of losing their quarry. Sergeant Torres, Holloway called out, "Get the wounded consolidated. Webb, cover the east." He crawled toward Private Chun, the young ranger who had taken a round through the hip. The kid was pale and shaking but conscious, his hands pressed against the wound while blood seeped between his fingers. Holloway pulled the tourniquet tight and watched some color return to the boy's face. "You're going to be fine," Holloway told him. "Just keep pressure on it." The valley had grown quiet. Occasional single shots still cracked from that impossible distance, but the volume of enemy fire had dropped to almost nothing. Holloway risked raising his head above the shallow depression and surveyed the battlefield. Bodies littered the ridgelines. Enemy fighters who had expected to massacre Americans now lay sprawled across the rocks they had used for cover. He counted at least a dozen visible from his position, and he knew there were more on the angles he could not see. His radio crackled. "Viper 6, this is Overwatch 1. Extraction inbound. ETA 15 minutes. Secure your casualties for movement." Holloway keyed his mic. "Overwatch 1, Viper 6. Who was providing fire support from the western ridge. That sniper just saved my entire patrol." Silence stretched for a long moment. Then Torres responded, his voice flat and controlled. "Situation is under control, Viper 6. Focus on your casualties. Extraction is priority." Holloway recognized evasion when he heard it. Someone had saved his men, and the SEAL team leader did not want to talk about who. He looked around at his rangers. 2 dead, their bodies already being prepared for transport with the gentle respect that soldiers showed their fallen. 4 wounded, including Chun with his hip and Webb with his face. 6 still combat effective, though every one of them would carry this valley in their nightmares for the rest of their lives. They should all be dead. The ambush had been perfect, the kill zone inescapable. By every calculation of warfare, 12 body bags should be heading home to 12 families. Instead, 10 men still breathed because someone on a distant ridge had decided to fight for them. Webb limped over, a field dressing pressed against his cheek. "Staff Sergeant," he said quietly, "I counted 14 shots from that western position. Maybe more. Every single one of them hit." Holloway nodded. He had counted too. "Whoever that was," Webb continued, "they're either the best sniper I have ever seen or the luckiest. And I do not believe in luck." Neither did Holloway. 14 shots, 14 kills, at ranges that had to exceed 1,000 meters. Shooting from an angle the enemy never anticipated, with timing and precision that spoke to extraordinary skill. That was not luck. That was mastery. The helicopters appeared on the horizon, rotors beating the morning air. Holloway watched them approach and thought about the questions he would ask when they reached base. Someone had saved his patrol. Someone command did not want to acknowledge. He intended to find out who. Maya sat alone in the team room at Forward Operating Base Chapman, methodically cleaning her rifle while the morning sun climbed higher outside. The familiar ritual of disassembly and maintenance steadied her hands even as her mind replayed the valley. 19 rounds fired. 14 confirmed kills. Ranges between 890 and 1,180 meters. For minutes of shooting that had ended careers and saved lives in equal measure. Her career was over. She knew that with the same certainty she knew her ballistic tables. Torres would see to it. The Navy would process the paperwork, and Petty Officer Second Class Maya Chun would become a cautionary tale about what happened when female operators forgot their place. Her hands did not shake. She had made her choice with eyes open, and she would make it again. The door slammed open and Torres filled the frame, his face dark with fury. He crossed the room in 3 strides and stood over her, close enough that she could see the vein pulsing in his temple. "You're done," he said. "You understand that? Done. I am recommending your immediate removal from this unit and court-martial for insubordination." Maya continued cleaning her rifle. The bolt carrier needed attention after 19 rounds in rapid succession. "Did you hear me, Chun?" Torres's voice rose. "You disobeyed a direct order. You compromised our position. You endangered this entire team with your reckless, undisciplined behavior." She looked up at him then, her expression calm. 12 Rangers were dying, Senior Chief. Air support was 40 minutes out. I had clear shots on the positions that were killing them. I took those shots. That was not your call to make. Maya set down the bolt carrier and gave Torres her full attention. "Then whose call was it? Yours? Because you told me those fighters were goat herders. You told me to stop clogging comms with phantom contacts. While you were assessing the situation, Americans were bleeding out in that valley." Torres leaned closer, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "You are a sniper, Chun. Your job is to follow orders, not to decide which orders are worth following. Not to play hero because you think you know better than your commanding officer. My job is to protect American lives." Maya stood, and though Torres had 6 inches on her, she did not give ground. "I did my job, Senior Chief. 10 men are going home to their families because I did my job. If you had done yours, I would not have needed to disobey you." For a moment, she thought Torres might strike her. His hands clenched at his sides, and something violent moved behind his eyes. Then he stepped back, his expression settling into the bureaucratic mask of a man who knew how to destroy careers through proper channels. "You are confined to quarters pending investigation," he said. "You will surrender your weapon and your communications equipment. You will speak to no one about this incident until the JAG office contacts you. Is that understood?" Maya held his gaze. "Understood, Senior Chief." She began reassembling her rifle with precise, unhurried movements. Torres watched her for a long moment, perhaps expecting defiance or tears or some acknowledgement that she understood the magnitude of what she had done to herself. She gave him nothing. Chief Petty Officer Walsh stood in the doorway, his weathered face unreadable. He had served with Torres for 3 years, had watched Maya be sidelined and dismissed, and assigned to positions where she could not prove herself. He said nothing now, but his eyes met Maya's briefly, and something complicated passed between them. "Walsh," Torres said without turning around. "Escort Petty Officer Chun to her quarters. Make sure she stays there." "Aye, Senior Chief." Maya finished assembling her rifle and handed it to Torres' grip first. He took it without acknowledgement and turned away, already pulling out his phone to begin whatever calls would seal her fate. She followed Walsh toward the door, then paused at the window. Outside, a helicopter was landing on the medical pad, its rotors kicking up dust as medics rushed toward it with stretchers. The wounded Rangers were arriving. She watched them unload a man with bandages wrapped around his face, another with his leg, immobilized, a third being carried because he could not walk. Behind them came 2 stretchers bearing black bags, the fallen who would make their final journey home under folded flags. 2 dead. It should have been 12. It should have been all of them. Chun, Walsh said quietly. "We need to go." She turned from the window and walked with him toward her quarters, toward the silence and waiting that would fill her days until the investigation decided her future. Behind her, the wounded Rangers disappeared into the medical facility, alive because she had chosen saving them over saving herself. Walsh walked beside her, without speaking until they reached her door. Then he paused, his hand on the frame, and said something so quiet she almost missed it. "For what it is worth," he said, "I would have taken those shots too." Then he was gone, and Maya was alone with the knowledge that at least one person understood. It was not much, but it was something. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Vance had investigated enough incidents to recognize when a report was hiding something. The after-action summary from the Karengal Valley ambush read like every other AR she had processed in her 18 months with JSOC, full of military precision and careful language, and absolutely nothing that explained how 12 Rangers had survived an unsurvivable situation. She spread the documents across her desk epigram and began reading again from the beginning. Ranger Patrol ambushed by enemy forces numbering approximately 30. 2 Kia for WIA. Enemy neutralized by coordinated overwatch fire. Extraction successful. Coordinated overwatch fire. The phrase appeared 3 times in Torres's report, always without specifics. No mention of which sniper positions engaged. No shot counts. No rangis. No explanation of how a SEAL sniper team had neutralized 30 entrenched fighters quickly enough to save 10 lives. Vance pulled the personnel files for the SEAL element. For operators, including Torres himself. She scanned the sniper qualifications and stopped on the 4th file. Petty Officer 2nd Class Maya Chun. Distinguished Marksman qualification. Top of her class at sniper school. 14 confirmed kills across 2 previous deployments. Commendations from 3 different commanding officers praising her precision and judgment under fire. Then she read Torres's evaluation of Chun from 2 weeks before the ambush. Adequate technical skills, but questionable judgment in high-pressure situations. Recommend continued observation before advancement. The disconnect was stark enough to make Vance sit back in her chair. Either 3 previous commanders had been wrong about Chun, or Torres was lying. She scheduled interviews for the following morning. Torres arrived first, his uniform pressed, and his bearing confident. He sat across from Vance with the easy assurance of a man who had navigated investigations before. Walk me through the engagement, Senior Chief. Torres obliged with practiced fluency. The ambush initiated at 0447. His team assessed the situation and coordinated response. Chun discharged her weapon without authorization, potentially compromising their position. The enemy was neutralized through combined efforts. Vance made notes. How many rounds did Chun fire? Torres paused, almost imperceptibly. Approximately 20. She was disciplined afterward for the unauthorized engagement. And how many of those rounds found their targets? Another pause. I would have to check the detailed logs. Vance nodded and moved on, but she had learned what she needed. Torres did not know how many kills Chun had scored because he did not want to know. Acknowledging her effectiveness would undermine the narrative he was building. Chun arrived for her interview an hour later. She wore her uniform without decoration, her expression composed, and her hands still at her sides. She sat where Torres had sat and waited. Petty Officer Chun, Vance began. Tell me about the morning of the ambush. What followed was unlike any debrief Vance had conducted. Chun spoke with clinical precision, providing exact ranges for each shot. 982 meters for the first PCAM position. 1,047 for the RPG team. She described windage adjustments, firing cadence, target prioritization. She recounted 19 rounds and 14 confirmed kills without a trace of boasting or apology. This was not the account of someone who had panicked. This was the methodical reconstruction of a professional executing her craft at the highest level. You disobeyed a direct order, Vance said. Yes, Commander. Why? Chun met her eyes without flinching. Because 12 Americans were dying and I could stop it. Senior Chief Torres denied my contact reports and refused engagement authorization. Air support was 40 minutes out. I made a judgment call. And if you were wrong, if you had compromised your team's position, then I would have been wrong. Chen's voice remained level. But I was not wrong. I reported the ambush setup accurately. I requested permission appropriately. When that permission was denied and men started dying, I did what I trained to do. Vance dismissed her and spent the next 3 hours with the communications logs. The transcripts confirmed everything Chun had claimed. 3 separate contact reports dismissed by Torres as go-herders. 2 requests for engagement authorization denied. Then Chen's final transmission announcing she was engaging, followed by Torres's furious orders to stand down, followed by silence when Chun turned off her radio. The timeline painted a damning picture. Chun had identified the threat. Torres had dismissed her. Americans had died because of that dismissal. Chun had disobeyed orders to save the survivors, and now Torres was trying to court-martial her for it. Vance closed the file and stared at the wall of her office. Something larger was happening here, something beyond a single firefight and a single act of insubordination. Torres's evaluation of Chun contradicted every other assessment in her file. His dismissal of her contact reports had nearly cost 12 lives. His response to her saving those lives was to recommend her removal. This was not about discipline or protocol. This was about something else entirely. She pulled up Torres's service record and began searching for the names of every female operator who had ever served under his command. The records arrived on Vance's desk 2 days later, and what they contained turned a single incident into something far larger. 3 female operators had served under Senior Chief Wilson Torres in the past 4 years. 3 women who had entered his command with exemplary records and left diminished, transferred, or gone from special operations entirely. Vance spread their files across her desk and began making phone calls. Hospital Corpsman Second Class Jennifer Reyes answered on the 3rd ring. She now served at a naval hospital in San Diego, far from the special operations world she had trained for. When Vance identified herself and mentioned Torres's name, the silence on the line stretched long enough that Vance thought the connection had dropped. "I requested transfer after 6 months," Reyes finally said. Her voice carried the careful neutrality of someone who had learned not to complain. Irreconcilable differences in operational philosophy. Vance pressed gently. "Can you be more specific?" Another pause. "Every mission, I was assigned to rear positions. My medical assessments were overruled by operators with no medical training. When I raised concerns about wounded teammates, Torres told me I was being emotional." She exhaled slowly. "After the 4th time he countermanded my triage decisions, I requested transfer. It was that or watch someone die because he would not listen to the only person in the room with actual medical knowledge." "Did you file a formal complaint?" Reyes laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Against a senior chief with 18 years and a chest full of ribbons? I just wanted out, Commander. I just wanted to go somewhere my training actually mattered." Vance documented the call and moved to the 2nd file. Intelligence Specialist First Class Tanya Morris had received a negative evaluation despite contributing analysis that led to 3 successful operations. She now worked a desk job at CENTCOM, her special operations career effectively over. Morris was more direct than Reyes. "He never let me brief my own intelligence," she said. "Every time I prepared an assessment, Torres would have a male officer present it. My name stayed on the paperwork, but I was never in the room when decisions were made." "Why not?" Morris's voice hardened. "He told me once that field commanders would not trust intelligence coming from a woman. Said he was protecting me from their bias by keeping me behind the scenes. Like I needed his protection instead of the opportunity one had earned." The 3rd call was the hardest to make. Explosive Ordnance Disposal Technician First Class Lisa Park had left Special Operations entirely. She had left the Navy entirely. Vance found her through a civilian contact number, working as an engineer for a private firm in Seattle. Park listened to Vance's questions in silence, then responded with the bluntness of someone no longer bound by military courtesy. "Torres told me directly that women lack the psychological stability for high-intensity operations." Her words came flat and tired, carrying the weight of battles fought and lost. "He said it in front of the whole team during a mission brief. When I objected, he put me on administrative duty for 2 weeks. Claimed I was proving his point by getting emotional." "Did anyone support you?" "Some of them wanted to. I could see it in their faces. But Torres had been there longer, ranked higher, knew all the right people. Speaking up for me meant putting themselves in his crosshairs." She paused. "I do not blame them for staying quiet. I blame the system that made staying quiet the smart career move." Park had one more thing to add before ending the call. "If you are investigating him because of another woman, Commander, then do not let him bury this one too. For is enough. For is too many." Vance spent the rest of the day organizing her findings. 3 women over 4 years. A hospital corpsman whose medical expertise was dismissed. An intelligence analyst silenced in briefing rooms. An EOD technician driven out of the Navy entirely. Each one with records that contradicted Torres's evaluations. Each one with stories that painted the same portrait of systematic exclusion. And now Maya Chun, whose accurate intelligence had been ignored and whose extraordinary skill had been punished because acknowledging either would mean admitting Torres had been wrong. Vance compiled her report and requested a meeting with the JSOC commander. This was no longer about one firefight in the Karengal Valley. This was about a senior NCO who had spent years sidelining qualified women, and whose prejudice had finally nearly cost 12 Rangers their lives. She thought about Chun confined to quarters, waiting to learn if her career would survive saving American lives. She thought about Torres in the team room, confident that the system would protect him as it always had. Not this time, Vance thought. Not if I have anything to say about it. She gathered her files and headed for the commander's office. The shrapnel wound in Marcus Webb's shoulder had started healing by the time he reached Fort Benning, but the questions in his head only grew louder with each passing day. He sat in his base, housing quarters, medical leave stretching before him like an accusation, and replayed the valley for the 100th time. The PKM fire walking toward his position. The certainty of death. And then that rifle, crack after crack after crack, turning the slaughter into salvation one precise shot at a time. 14 kills. Webb had counted the bodies himself before extraction, moving through the ridgelines while his face still bled. 14 enemy fighters dropped at ranges that pushed the limits of what sniper rifles could do. Whoever had been on that western ridge was not just good. They were extraordinary, and no one would tell him who they were. He called Holloway 3 days after arriving stateside. The connection crackled with a particular distortion of calls routed through military networks halfway around the world. Staff Sergeant, Webb said, I need to know who was shooting that day. Holloway's voice came back tired and frustrated. I have been asking the same question, Webb. The official report credits SEAL Overwatch support. No individual operator named. No details. It is like someone wants to bury the story. That does not make sense. 14 kills at distance, saves our entire patrol, and nobody gets credit? Holloway was quiet for a moment. I talked to a buddy in the TOC. He said there is an investigation ongoing. Something about unauthorized engagement. A female sniper is involved. Webb processed that. A woman. A woman had saved his life, had saved all of them, with shooting that would have impressed any operator in any special operations unit in the world. And now there was an investigation, which meant someone was trying to turn her heroism into a crime. What is her name? Webb asked. Holloway did not have it. But he had contacts, and Webb had contacts, and between them they began pulling threads. The network that connected special operations veterans was informal but extensive. Webb called a sergeant major he had served with in Syria. That sergeant major called a chief at DevGru. The chief called a friend at Bagram who owed him a favor. For days later, Webb had a name. Petty Officer Second Class Maya Chun. SEAL sniper attached to a Joint Operations Task Force. Currently confined to quarters pending investigation for insubordination. Insubordination. The word burned in Webb's throat. She had disobeyed orders to save 12 lives, and they were calling it insubordination. He dug deeper. His buddy at Bagram sent him unofficial details in encrypted messages that would disappear after reading. Chun had reported the ambush setup before it happened. Her team leader had dismissed her warnings. When men started dying, she had requested permission to engage and been denied. So she had turned off her radio and done what needed doing. Webb sat with that information for a long time. He thought about the moments before the rifle started firing, when he had been lying in the dirt making peace with death. He thought about his wife and his 2 daughters and a lifetime of moments he would have missed if Chun had followed orders. She had chosen them over her career. She had chosen strangers over herself. And now the system was punishing her for it. He reached out to the other survivors. Specialist Torres responded within hours, his message short and angry. I heard about the investigation. This is wrong, Sergeant. What do we do? Private Chun, no relation to their savior, was still recovering from his hip wound at Walter Reed. Even medicated and half-coherent, his response was clear. She saved my life. Whatever you are planning, I am in. Corporal Martinez had not survived the valley, but his brother served at Fort Bragg. When Webb explained what had happened, the brother's voice went cold with purpose. Tell me what you need. The network grew. Survivors and their families. Soldiers who heard the story and recognized the injustice. Rangers who understood that what happened in that valley was not insubordination, but exactly the kind of decisive action that separated the exceptional from the ordinary. Webb coordinated through secure channels, gathering names and statements and contact information. 10 men owed Maya Chun their lives. 10 families would have buried their sons and brothers and husbands if she had followed orders. That debt meant something. That debt demanded action. He drafted a letter to the JSOC commander, then rewrote it again. The words had to be precise. They had to convey the reality of what had happened without crossing lines that would undermine their credibility. Staff Sergeant Holloway called from Afghanistan with news. "There is an investigator," he said. "Lieutenant Commander Vance. Word is she is looking at the SEAL team leader, not just Chun. Something about a pattern." A pattern. Webb did not know what that meant, but he recognized momentum when he heard it. The story was growing beyond what anyone could bury. He looked at the Ranger tab on his desk, the symbol of everything he had earned and everything he had almost lost. Maya Chun was not a Ranger. She would never wear that tab, but she had earned something that mattered more. Webb picked up his phone and started making calls. Their guardian angel was fighting for her career. It was time for the men she had saved to fight for her. Senior Chief Wilson Torres had walked into Commander's offices dozens of times across 18 years of service. He knew how these meetings worked. The brass needed someone to sign off on paperwork, needed a senior NCO to confirm the official story, needed the machinery of accountability to grind through its motions before everyone moved on. This meeting would be no different. Chun had disobeyed orders. The facts supported disciplinary action. Torres would provide his statement. The commander would nod gravely, and another female operator would learn that special operations had no room for those who could not follow the chain of command. He straightened his uniform and pushed through the door. The configuration of the room stopped him 2 steps inside. Colonel Marcus Bradley sat behind his desk, but he was not alone. Lieutenant Commander Vance occupied a chair to his left, a thick folder open in her lap. To the right sat a JAG Officer Torres did not recognize, her collar insignia marking her as a commander. 3 sets of eyes fixed on him with expressions that carried nothing of the routine he had expected. Senior Chief Torres. Colonel Bradley's voice was flat. "Have a seat." Torres sat. The chair felt harder than it should have. Lieutenant Commander Vance has been conducting an investigation into the Korengal Valley incident. Bradley gestured toward her. "She has findings she would like to discuss with you." Vance opened her folder with the deliberate care of someone who had organized her ammunition precisely. She did not look at Torres as she began speaking. "Senior Chief, I have reviewed the communications logs from the morning of the ambush. At 0431, Petty Officer Chun reported 3 military-age males establishing a position on the East Ridge. You dismissed the report as goat herders. At 0439, she reported those same individuals setting up a PCAM emplacement with clear firing lanes on the Ranger patrol. You told her to stop clogging comms." Torres kept his expression neutral. Chun was inexperienced. She misidentified. At 0446, Vance continued as though he had not spoken. Chun reported a coordinated ambush being established with over 30 fighters on 3 sides of the valley. You threatened her with psychiatric evaluation if she transmitted again. The room was very quiet. The ambush initiated at 0447. Vance turned a page. Chun requested permission to engage at 0448. You denied that request. She requested again at 0449, noting that Rangers were dying. You denied again and threatened court-martial. Torres felt the first cold touch of something he did not want to name. This was not how the meeting was supposed to go. At 0450, Chun announced she was engaging and turned off her radio. Over the next 4 minutes, she fired 19 rounds and scored 14 confirmed kills at ranges between 890 and 1,180 meters. Her actions directly saved the lives of 10 American service members. Vance closed that folder and opened another. I have also reviewed your service record, Senior Chief. Specifically, I have spoken with 3 female operators who previously served under your command. The cold spread through Torres's chest. Hospital Corpsman Reyes, whose medical expertise you repeatedly overruled. Intelligence Specialist Morris, whom you never allowed to brief her own analysis. Yodi Technician Park, whom you told directly that women lack the psychological stability for high-intensity operations. Torres found his voice. Those are personnel matters. Private disagreements between 3 women in 4 years. Vance's tone did not change, but something harder moved beneath it. 3 women with exemplary records who left your command diminished, transferred, or driven from special operations entirely. And now a 4th, whose accurate intelligence you dismissed and whose extraordinary performance you are attempting to court-martial. Colonel Bradley leaned forward. Senior Chief, I'm going to ask you one question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Torres met the colonel's eyes and saw nothing there that offered hope. If Petty Officer Chun had followed your orders and held her position, how many Rangers would have died in that valley? The question hung in the air. Torres opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The mathematics were inescapable. The geometry was absolute. 12 men in a kill zone with 30 shooters and no air support for 40 minutes. He had no answer that would save him. The JAG officer spoke for the first time. Senior Chief Torres, you are being relieved of operational command effective immediately, pending formal investigation into conduct unbecoming an officer and potential violations of equal opportunity regulations. Torres stood abruptly. Colonel, I have 18 years of service. I have led operators through. Bradley cut him off with a raised hand. You have 18 years of service that apparently included systematically marginalizing qualified personnel based on gender. His voice carried the quiet fury of a commander who had trusted the wrong subordinate. 12 families almost lost their sons and brothers because you would not trust a sniper whose only failing was being a woman. That is not leadership, Senior Chief. That is liability. Torres looked around the room for an ally and found none. Vance watched him with professional detachment. The JAG officer was already making notes. Bradley's expression held nothing but contempt. 18 years. 18 years of deployments and firefights, and the unshakable conviction that he understood what special operations required. 18 years ending in a room where 3 women he barely remembered had reached out from the past to destroy him, and 1 woman he had dismissed as inadequate had become the instrument of his downfall. You are dismissed, Senior Chief. Bradley turned back to his paperwork. Someone will escort you to collect your personal effects. Torres walked out of the office on legs that did not feel entirely his own. The corridor stretched before him, familiar and suddenly foreign, the path to a future he no longer controlled. Behind him, he heard Vance's voice, already moving on to the next item of business. Now, Colonel, about Petty Officer Chen's commendation. 12 days in quarters had given Maya Chen plenty of time to think about the shape her life might take after the Navy decided her fate. She had mapped out the possibilities with the same precision she applied to ballistic calculations. Best case, a letter of reprimand and reassignment to a unit where she would never hold a rifle again. Worst case, court-martial, discharge, and the end of everything she had built since the day she raised her hand and swore an oath. The middle ground held variations she tried not to dwell on. The knock on her door came at 1400, and she expected another routine check from the duty officer. Instead, Chief Petty Officer Walsh stood in the corridor with an expression she could not read. You have visitors, he said. Dayroom. I would clean up if I were you. Visitors. The word carried no meaning she could parse. Her family was in California. Her friends from the teams would not risk association with someone under investigation. She had no idea who would travel to Bagram to see a petty officer confined to quarters. She straightened her uniform and walked to the dayroom. 2 men stood near the window, silhouettes against the afternoon light. Both wore Army combat uniforms. Both turned when she entered. One had a fresh scar running down his cheek. The other held himself with the careful posture of someone protecting a healing wound. Maya stopped 3 steps inside the door. The man with the scar spoke first. Petty Officer Chun? Yes. He crossed the room toward her, as she recognized him, then from the thermal images she had studied in her scope. Sergeant First Class Webb, the one who had been bleeding in the dirt when the PKM fire walked toward his position. "I'm Marcus Webb," he said. "This is Staff Sergeant Derek Holloway. We were in the valley." The valley. Such a small word for the place where she had ended her career and saved their lives. Holloway stepped forward. His eyes moved across her face as though memorizing features he had never expected to see. "We have spent 2 weeks trying to find out who was on that ridge. Nobody would tell us. The official report buried your name like it was something to be ashamed of." Maya did not know what to say, so she said nothing. Webb spoke again, his voice rough with something that might have been exhaustion or might have been something else entirely. "I was lying in the dirt that morning, petty officer. I had shrapnel on my shoulder and blood in my eyes, and I was listening to my brothers die around me. I made peace with it. I said goodbye to my wife and daughters in my head because I knew I was never going to see them again." He paused, and Maya watched his jaw tighten with the effort of control. "Then I heard your rifle. One shot, and the machine gun that was about to kill me went quiet. Another shot, and the RPG team dropped. You fired 19 times, and every single round found someone who was trying to murder us. 14 confirmed kills," Maya said quietly. 5 of the shots were suppressive. Webb almost smiled. 14 kills at distances I cannot even imagine, while we were dying and nobody else would help. He shook his head slowly. "We came here to say thank you. We came here because 12 families have their sons and brothers and husbands because of what you did. Whatever happens with your career, whatever the investigation decides, we needed you to know that." Holloway reached into his pocket and withdrew something small. 10 of us made it home because of you," he said. 2 did not. Martinez and Donovan. They were dead before you started shooting, and there was nothing anyone could have done. But the rest of us, we are here because you made a choice." He opened his hand. A Ranger tab lay in his palm, the distinctive black and gold insignia that marked the Army's elite light infantry. Signatures covered the fabric in permanent marker, names written small and tight to fit them all. "You're not a Ranger," Holloway said. "You will never wear this tab. But every man who survived that valley signed it, and we wanted you to have it. You earn it the only way that matters." Maya took the tab. The fabric was warm from Holloway's hand. The signatures blurred slightly as she looked at them, and she realized her eyes were wet. She had trained herself to control every physical response, to steady her breathing and slow her heart, and keep her hand from shaking even when the world fell apart around her. But she had not trained for this. She had not prepared for gratitude. "I turned off my radio," she said. "I disobeyed a direct order. I knew what it would cost me." Webb nodded. "And you did it anyway, because following orders meant watching us die, and you could not live with that." "No." She held the tab against her chest. "I could not." Holloway glanced at Webb, then back at Maya. "We have been making calls," he said. "The other survivors, their families, people who heard what happened. There is a network now. People who know what you did and will not let it be buried." Webb picked up the thread. "Lieutenant Commander Vance is building a case that goes way beyond one firefight. Torres is finished. And you, Petty Officer Chun, you're going to come out of this with more than a letter of reprimand." Maya looked at the 2 men who had traveled halfway around the world to stand in a day room and thank her for saving their lives. She thought about the 19 rounds and the 4 minutes and the choice she had made when following orders meant letting Americans die. She had been prepared to lose everything. She had not been prepared to gain something she had never known she needed. "Thank you," she said, "for coming. For this." She held up the tab. "I do not know what else to say." Webb extended his hand, and she shook it. "You do not have to say anything," he told her. "Just know that you are not alone in this. Not anymore." The ceremony took place in a conference room at Bagram, far from the parade grounds and public spectacle that usually accompanied such recognitions. Operational security demanded discretion. The work Maya Chun did could not be celebrated in places where cameras might capture faces or names that needed to remain in shadow. But the audience that gathered in that small room carried more weight than any public assembly could have offered. Colonel Bradley stood at the front, the citation folder open in his hands. Lieutenant Commander Vance occupied a seat near the wall, her investigation complete and her recommendations accepted. The surviving members of the Ranger Patrol filled one side of the room, Webb and Holloway in front, the others arranged behind them in two neat rows. Chief Petty Officer Walsh stood with the SEAL team members who had served alongside Maya, his expression carrying something that looked like unfinished business. Maya stood at attention in her dress uniform, the fabric pressed sharp and her ribbons aligned with precision. She had not expected to wear this uniform again. She had expected a courtroom and a discharge and the quiet end of everything she had built. The citation began with the dry language of military documentation, but the words painted a picture that needed no embellishment. Petty Officer Second Class Maya Chen distinguished herself through extraordinary heroism on October 15th during combat operations in Korengal Valley, Afghanistan. When a friendly patrol came under devastating ambush by numerically superior enemy forces, Petty Officer Chen demonstrated exceptional tactical judgment and unparalleled marksmanship under extreme pressure. Colonel Bradley's voice carried through the room, measured and deliberate. Despite initial denial of her contact reports and subsequent denial of engagement authorization, Petty Officer Chen recognized that immediate action was necessary to prevent the annihilation of 12 American service members. Acting on her own initiative, she engaged enemy positions at ranges between 890 and 1,180 meters, achieving 14 confirmed kills in approximately 4 minutes of sustained fire. Maya kept her eyes forward. She could feel the Rangers watching her, could sense their attention like heat against her skin. Her decisive actions directly neutralized the enemy ambush and preserved the lives of 10 American soldiers who would otherwise have perished. Petty Officer Chen's extraordinary courage, exceptional skill, and unwavering commitment to her fellow service members reflect the highest traditions of the United States Naval Special Warfare community. Colonel Bradley closed the folder and lifted a small box from the table beside him. He crossed to where Maya stood and opened it to reveal the silver star, its ribbon bright against the dark velvet. Petty Officer Chen, he said quietly as he pinned the medal to her uniform. Your actions have prompted a comprehensive review of joint operations protocols. How female operators are assigned. How contact reports are evaluated. How engagement authorization is processed. He met her eyes. You did more than save 10 lives that day. You exposed failures that could have cost many more. Maya held his gaze. Thank you, Colonel. He stepped back, and the room broke into applause that felt strange in such a small space. The Rangers clapped longest, Webb and Holloway leading the others in recognition that transcended service branches and unit loyalties. When the applause faded, the room began to shift into the informal patterns of a reception. Maya found herself surrounded by Rangers who wanted to shake her hand, to say words they had carried across oceans to deliver. She accepted each greeting with the same composed courtesy, still not entirely certain how to navigate gratitude of this magnitude. Walsh approached when a crowd thinned. He waited until the nearest Ranger stepped away, then stood before her with his hands clasped behind his back. I owe you an apology, he said. His voice was low enough that only she could hear. I watched Torres sideline you for months. I saw what he was doing, and I said nothing. I told myself it was not my place. I told myself speaking up would only make things worse. Maya studied his face. She saw the weight of his silence etched in the lines around his eyes. I'm not sure I can forgive myself for that, Walsh continued. But I needed you to know that I see it now. And I needed you to know that the next time I see something wrong, I will not stay quiet. She considered his words for a long moment. I do not need your apology, Chief. I need you to keep that promise. Walsh nodded slowly. You have my word. He stepped away, and Holloway took his place. The staff sergeant held the Ranger tab they had given her days before, now mounted in a small wooden frame with a brass plate beneath it. We had this made, he said, so you could display it properly. The plate says what we could not fit on the fabric itself. Maya took the frame and read the inscription. To P.O. to Maya Chen. You were never a Ranger. But when Rangers needed you most, you answered. We will never forget. She traced the words with her fingertip. Thank you, she said. All of you. Webb appeared at Holloway's shoulder. There is one more thing, he said. We have been talking the survivors and their families. We want to stay connected. not just now, but going forward. You are part of our story, Petty Officer. We would like you to be part of our lives." Maya looked at the men who had come to find her, who had refused to let her sacrifice go unacknowledged. She thought about the choices that bring people together, about the moments when doing what is right means standing alone until others find the courage to stand with you. If you're watching this somewhere tonight, maybe you know what that feels like. Maybe you have faced a moment when following the rules meant betraying something more important. Maybe you chose the harder path, or maybe you wish you had. "I would be honored," Maya told them, and she meant it. 6 months later, Maya Chun stood on a different ridge, watching a different kind of battle unfold. The sniper range at Camp Pendleton stretched before her, targets positioned at intervals from 400 to 1,200 meters. Her students lay prone along the firing line, a mix of SEALs and Marines and Rangers that would have been unthinkable a year ago. The new Joint Operations Initiative required integrated training, and Maya had been selected to help build it. She walked the line with her hands clasped behind her back, observing breathing patterns and trigger discipline and the small adjustments that separated adequate shooters from exceptional ones. A young Marine Corps Lance Corporal caught her attention, a woman named Vasquez who had qualified for sniper school against considerable resistance from her chain of command. Vasquez fired. 800 meters downrange, the target registered a hit 2 inches left of center. "You are anticipating the recoil," Maya said. She knelt beside the Lance Corporal and pointed at her shoulder. "You tense here just before the shot breaks. Trust the rifle. Trust your training. The bullet will go where you tell it." Vasquez nodded and settled back into position. Her next shot struck center mass. Maya moved on, but she allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. Vasquez would face the same doubts and dismissals that Maya had faced. She would encounter men who questioned whether she belonged. But she would also have something Maya had lacked: proof that women could excel in this world, visible and undeniable proof wearing instructor credentials and a silver star. The training session ended at 1600. Maya dismissed her students and watched them gather their equipment with the easy camaraderie that developed among people who shared difficult work. The integration was not perfect. Old prejudices did not vanish because someone wrote new protocols, but it was better than before, and better was the direction that mattered. Lieutenant Commander Vance found her in the instructor office an hour later. Vance had transferred to Special Operations Oversight after the investigation concluded, her work on the Torres case earning her a reputation as someone who would pursue the truth regardless of where it led. She settled into the chair across from Maya's desk and set down 2 cups of coffee. "I have news," she said. "Torres pled guilty yesterday. Conduct unbecoming. He will be reduced in rank and administratively separated." Maya accepted the coffee and considered the information. 18 years of service ending in a plea deal and a quiet exit. It was less than Torres deserved, but it was more than the system usually delivered. "What about the others?" she asked. "The women he pushed out." Vance nodded slowly. "Reyes has been offered reinstatement to a Special Operations Medical Unit, if she wants it. Morris is being considered for an intelligence position at JSOC. Park declined to return, but her record has been amended to reflect what actually happened under Torres's command. 3 women whose careers have been damaged by one man's prejudice. 3 women who now had the choice to rebuild what had been taken from them. It was not justice, not entirely, but it was acknowledgement, and acknowledgement was where healing began. 6 other units have implemented the new evaluation protocols," Vance continued. "Contact reports now require documented responses. Engagement authorization denials get automatic review." She smiled slightly. "Your 19 rounds changed more than one firefight, Petty Officer." Maya thought about the valley. She thought about it often, usually in the quiet hours before sleep when her mind replayed the ranges and the windage and the faces she had never seen clearly but would never forget. 14 men who had died by her hand. 10 men who had lived because of it. She did not regret the kills. She did not celebrate them either. They were simply the weight she carried, the price of the choice she had made, when following orders meant watching Americans die. Her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at the screen and felt something warm move through her chest. Webb. The reunion is confirmed for next month. Whole patrol coming. Families too. You better be there. She typed back quickly. I will be there. The bond between Maya and the Rangers had only deepened in the months since pogrom. They called on birthdays. They sent pictures of children and grandchildren. They remembered the valley together in ways that no one else could understand. She was not a Ranger, would never wear the tab except the framed one that hung in her quarters. But she was part of their story now, woven into the fabric of 12 lives that had almost ended on an October morning in Afghanistan. Vance stood to leave, then paused at the door. I almost forgot. She reached in her folder and withdrew an envelope. This came through channels. Apparently someone thought you should have it. Maya opened the envelope and found a photograph. The Karangal Valley, shot from the western ridge where she had lain that morning. Someone had marked her position with a small red dot, had drawn lines to each of the enemy positions she had engaged. 14 lines radiating outward like spokes from a wheel, each one ending where a fighter had fallen. On the back, a handwritten note in unfamiliar script. To the guardian angel we never saw. From all of us who came home. She did not know who had sent it. One of the Rangers, perhaps, or someone from the investigation team, or a stranger who had heard the story and wanted her to know it mattered. The source did not matter. What mattered was the truth the image represented. Maya pinned the photograph to her wall beside the framed Ranger tab. Then she picked up her rifle and headed back to the range, because the skills that saved lives needed to stay sharp. There would always be another ridge, another valley, another moment when someone had to make the choice between following orders and doing what was right. When that moment came, she intended to be ready.